Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Dave, and today I'm hanging out with Seth Skorkowsky, and hopefully I didn't butcher your name too bad, sir. How are you today?
Doing very well. How are you?
Good, good. So Seth is a fellow YouTuber and also an author, or is he an author and also a fellow YouTuber? We were just trying to figure that out earlier. We're not sure. Uh, so um, it's great to have you on the show. We've had you on in the past, and unfortunately, I think we were discussing there was like a convention going on or something, and I think I was away, so I had to hand you off to very capable hands of Doug, Nerditor Doug. But yeah, it's great to have you on with me today, and as we were saying earlier, it was awesome to meet in person at Gen Con.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It was Nerdarchy was the first channel to actually like call me out. So, that was kind of like the first sign of like, oh, I'm getting noticed. It was you guys.
Well, for us anyway, it's just about sharing the community and the hobby. And early on when we first started this, there was definitely there was this small but very vocal segment of the community that was very anti business, anti profit, or making money, and we started with, no, this is a business. We plan on monetizing it and making money, and we've always been very upfront about that. So we kind of ignored that community that was here, and we were cordial to them. But then we just wanted to reach out to everyone that we could and build our own community, and also invite other people that had their own communities in to come hang out. And they're doing cool nerdy things. Why not? We should all be friends.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You're never going to find a subculture of fandom or anything nerdy that does not have just bizarre Civil War riffs. And you're just sitting back and say, you guys are all in a very niche market. You should all just get along because you're in a very niche market and not break into different camps. But it's just the way of people.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? So, if I was to start reading your books, where would be the best place to start, man?
Well, that depends on what it is you want. I actually got different things that appeal to different people. The my Valdekin series, which hold on, begins with Dameron, is urban fantasy about monster hunters, and they're full novels. There's 4 novels in that series. It is very action sort of thing, just modern day monster hunting. That's 4 novels. They're all essentially standalones. But then I do a more pulpy classic fantasy series with my Tales of the Black Raven series. And these are actually just short stories. I did it in the classic style, like Fawford and the Great Mauser. So, a lot of people, if they want a novel, they probably shouldn't go to that. If they're wanting pulp short fiction, that's what you do with that. Then my most recent novel, Ashes of Onyx, hold on, right here. That came out earlier this year, and that is urban fantasy turned portal fantasy with mythos and a lot of more adult, darker themes. So it just kind of depends on what it is you like. I usually recommend Dameron. That seems to have the more mass appeal than any of them.
Okay. So for folks joining us, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Just put a question in front of it. It makes life easier for us to pick them out. Also, in the pinned comment, you can find links to a bunch of Seth's great works, his Amazon YouTube, his Amazon author page, his website, as well as his YouTube channel. I'm sure many of you are pretty much aware of who Seth is anyway. Because you're a lot of fun. I've enjoyed many of your videos myself. We may have even done some video responses to you. We've got a lot of videos. I don't know what we've actually done anymore.
I know you guys did one over like YouTubers you should pay attention to, because that was
Yeah, we definitely had you on the list there for sure.
And then I'll see you guys comment on different videos and stuff. That's always I always find it really cool when another creator just says something.
I think no. I think a lot of creators though don't watch a lot of other content just because I've heard a lot of different reasons. I think the biggest one probably is we're all just really busy creating content, so it leaves less time for consuming content. And then I've also heard people say they don't like to be influenced by other people, what other people are doing, but I actually do like that part.
Well, so for that, it's the same as writing, with which is some people are like, well, I don't want to watch that and get influenced. It's like, well, why don't you watch it and learn from it and improve? Because especially a lot of my much older stuff, basically my first year's worth of videos, I could have really benefited from seeing what other people said on certain topics, to learn how to phrase a lot of what it was better, or take certain aspects into account. Because you say this opinion, and then you watch somebody else's opinion, and they've kind of got a different slant on it or something to add. It's like, oh, damn. They're right. I just didn't think of that on my own. And which there is the fear of, like, I put out a topic over something or other, and then I find out that you guys did that topic like a month before, and that's happened. But it's like, well, I was thinking about this long before they posted the video, and I'm sure they were thinking about that long before they posted the video. It's just, we're talking about the same type of stuff. There's going to be a lot of crossover. So I'm not too worried about that. A lot of it's the time.
Yeah, especially like I've got a lot of friends that are streamers, and like that's a huge commitment. When you're talking about a game that spans 3-4 hours.
Oh God, I've only started doing a couple live streams, and half the time I'm like, I don't know how people do this every single day. Like, more power to them. I couldn't do it. That's a level of stamina that you don't really appreciate till you find yourself in it.
Yeah, sometimes I worry I'm not nerd enough. I'm like, oh my god, I'm not playing D&D, 9 times a week every week. Do I not like the game enough? Like, I'm definitely like, if I play once a week, I'm happy. If 2 or 3 times, okay. Any more than that, that's huge, a huge time commitment. And I start to get tired of it.
Well, so out of my core group, 2 of them we've been playing together since '99, and back at college, we played every single week, sometimes twice a week. And as the years have rolled on, we can only get to play 1, maybe 2 days a month. But those are now these, instead of 3-4 hour games, these marathon 8 to 10 hour games. But that also includes us catching up with each other, because those are the only 2 days a month we get to see each other, really. So when I hear people talk about like, oh, we play every Thursday, it's like, my God, my schedule has not been able to accommodate that since I was 22.
Part of the reason we started Nerdarchy was like to do these things that we like to do, and to con our wives, and to be like, sorry, I gotta work. And that's how we got back to like the regular weekly game. And even then, for like the longest time, what we were doing was Ted would run a game on Saturday, I would run a game on a Saturday, then we had another DM that would run a different game. So we found that really helpful for not getting burnout as the GM, and for our stories and games to not collapse, because our group was notorious for running for a while, and the DM, it would be the same DM. They would either get bored or, get DM exhaustion would kick in. It would end, someone would take over, and then we'd never go back to those games.
Yeah, I've broken a lot of promises with my guys, because I'm like, we're just going to take a break from this for a while. We're going to try something else. I swear we'll get back to it.
Yeah.
And for a while they stopped believing me, and I was kind of like, no, I'm totally going to. No, I never did. Like, they were right.
And that's what happens. But I like when we start that formula, like it kind of stunk to be so far between each session for that particular game. But by doing that, we had 2 games that essentially went from level 1 to level 20, over the course of a couple years, and we've never had that happen before. Ted is actually finished up a another campaign and started another one since then, since we started kind of doing it that way. And so it really helps a lot. And as a GM, you never really feel like overburdened. And for that third session, the other GM that we had coming in would usually run a non D&D game for us that we didn't have to learn, because they would come in, we'd know enough to build our characters, and then we would learn as we play. So so that was really great as well.
No, that sounds awesome, because it's a very big palate cleanser.
Yes.
Yeah, where it's like, okay, we're doing D&D and D&D. It's like, now we're just going to do something totally different. Now back to D&D, D&D. And then this learning experience, because if the GM knows the rules, it's so much easier to come in as a player, because you're not worried about all the mechanical aspects, versus if you're trying to learn a new game and run it, and that's so much, that's stressful, and everybody else is stressed because they know you're stressed. So that's a cool setup.
And then, like, that GM liked to run these really condensed, accelerated arcs. So, like, I think his thing was like 3, 5, or 7 sessions, but you would like advance quickly through whatever the leveling system was for that particular game. So it gave you kind of like, you got to run the gambit a little bit. You got a full completed story, and you got the taste for a new game. And then it would end, and we'd do it again with something else. So that was a lot of fun. We're actually trying to bring that back, and we're really lucky because, well, we were really lucky. We still kind of are. But James Intercasso lives local to us, and I don't know if you know who he is or not, but he does the Don't Split the Podcast Network, and then he also has written a bunch of stuff for Watts and other publishers as well. So he's going to be our new guy to come in and run a different game each month. And we were going to do it in person, but the apocalypse hit.
The apocalypse never times itself right.
No, it doesn't. What are you going to do? So we did have a question from Eric a little bit ago. How do you use set pieces in your games?
Set pieces are pretty limited. We've had an uptick in them because one of our guys is a 3D printer addict, and so all of a sudden he started arriving with boxes of set pieces. Normally, we just do miniatures for vehicles and people, and then I've just got a battle mat with a piece of plexiglass laying over it that we just write it all out in wet erase. And, half the time, set pieces to me is like, if I really got deeply into that, it'd require that I had a storage shed just to hold all of them. Because you go to cons, you go to comic shops, and you see those amazing ones that people set up, and it's like, this would own me, and I would have to make a new one for absolutely every situation. No one would see me again, so it's pretty limited.
Ted recently has gotten into doing that a lot, but he likes crafting. Mm-hmm. So that's like another one of his hobbies. So it's less of a big deal, but he does have to figure out all the storage stuff, and he also will have his kids like primer stuff for him and do that. But also when I see that question though, I also think like you can use encounter set pieces and set pieces in your game that aren't actually physically things, just things that you highlight when it's about to go down or something interesting is going to happen in the game. I think that's always cool to do. Just because the players will want to interact with it and figure out what it does. If you have a battle taking place in the Underdark and it's in a toadstool forest where they're big, but they're only up to your waist, but there's one giant one with glowing polka dots on it in the center, with, kind of vines and stuff hanging from it. They might be like, oh, what does that do? How can I use it? Oh, if something gets near it, the vines kind of wrap around them. So you can use it to kind of try and push the enemies into it, or the enemies are trying to push you into it. So I kind of think of it that way too.
Oh, no. And it comes to like, basically obstacles and assets are just, facets around the board. I'm a firm believer that absolutely anything that you mention has the potential of becoming really important. And it's the same thing with writing. You have to mention it before it becomes important. If if all of a sudden the giant mushroom lashes out with its vines, they should have seen them hanging, or they should have known something was up about it before it happened, unless um, it's basically a trap monster. But if part of the like, if the pillars around the room are important, they need to know those pillars are there. But you need to mention there's pillars more often. That way, the fact that you mentioned them isn't the clue that they're important. So you kind of describe what it looks like, and that's just one aspect to it. And then those end up being the thing that's important. So I always try to like describe it or draw it out in a way that there's a lot of facets, and some of it might be really critical, some of it might just be window dressing, and they don't know.
So recently on Twitter, I've seen a movement for getting rid of box text in adventures and modules. Do you have an opinion on that?
You know, okay, I like box text, but there is a point where it is abused and over the top. And so some modules have, I guess, been a little too enthusiastic with their box text, where I prefer it if it's got about a paragraph, and if it needs to be longer than that, I'd prefer it to be a handout or something. But just having the game master read a page and a half worth of, oh my god, that's boring as hell. It's boring to do, it's boring to listen to. So and then with box text, I very rarely actually read the box text to everybody. I usually just kind of bullet point it and just say, this is the information you need, guys. But I like it, but there is a point where it becomes too much.
Yeah, I think you kind of said what I normally do is I paraphrase it, and if it's too long, you can't really effectively do that. Although I did ask another guest about that, and her answer was interesting, and you kind of actually spoke to this when we were talking about set pieces, and the idea that a good adventure writer is going to use that box text to point out the important things in the scene or an encounter. But I feel like if you have a page and a half of that, you're not doing that anymore. You're just narrating to your players.
No, and this is, I said, it's part of the. As a player, it's boring just to sit there while your GM is reading a page of text. And as a GM, it's boring to sit there and read a page of text. I mean, like, no one enjoys it. No one in the room likes that. The game writer probably liked it, but they're not there at the time. So
yeah, it makes me think of The Incredibles, and Syndrome's like, "Oh, you got me monologuing." But yeah, it's funny. So we do got another question. And folks, remember, put question in front because it just makes it easier for us to pick them out. So, Kamo, what are y'all's D&D adjacent hobbies like adventure writing, mini painting, map making, etc.?
I still paint. I used to think I was a pretty good mini painter, and then the internet came along, and I realized that I am terrible compared to a lot of the people that post their miniatures now. I do. I'm an author, so that takes up time. I'll do Renaissance fairs. We always have a lot of just little hobbies that we do. So I'm usually busy with like 2 or 3 hobbies at any time.
Yeah, and we're also both D&D RPG/RPG YouTubers. Does that count? Because that takes up a huge amount of time.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of people are like, oh, God, are you gonna be able to knock out so much more content with all the stuff going on? It's like, you guys, this is already a full-time job. Like,
Yeah.
like I stay at home all day working on this already. I don't suddenly have more time on my hands. So, because when you unleash a 20-minute video, it's like it took days to set that up and do everything for it.
The amount of time it takes to do a video, at the bare minimum, is like 3 to 5 times the length of that video.
Oh well, it's like, I don't know. It's like running a good adventure. Everybody shows up and they get to experience a 3-hour session. It's like, yeah, they didn't see how many hours that you spent mapping out what the dungeon would do and like getting all the monster stats and spells in place so you could do it. They just saw the adventure. It's like, Yeah, there was a lot of pre-work that went into that. And the reason you enjoyed the adventure so much is all the pre-work I just did behind the scenes. So,
Well, you know what? That's a good segue into how much prep do you actually do for your games?
um, yeah, as a general rule of thumb, because it can be more, it can be less. I spend about 2 hours prepping for every hour we actually play. But prepping could mean I'm driving to the store trying to figure out a really cool thing that we could do in this situation, or I'm reading through a list of like 10 spells trying to figure out which ones I need to give the bad guy and stuff. So I think a lot of people think that prep is like furiously typing at a computer. It's like, no, a lot of it's organizing it. I get all the monster stats, put them in one spot. So when the game starts, I don't flip in the book. It's just right there. But a lot of it's figuring out like, how the hell am I going to do a really cool puzzle in this room? It makes sense that there would be a puzzle like that in this room.
Are you an analog or digital guy when it comes to running your games?
Analog.
I used to be, and like I used to write my own box text, and my notebooks looked like full on adventures, and now it's like now I'm just like I may write down a few sentences and then I got tabs open everywhere, and I just flip from tab to tab.
A lot of the times, some of my adventures tree, my players have said like, man, you should try to publish this one. It's like, okay, what that adventure looked like on my side of the screen was literally a map drawn on graph paper with just crazy abbreviations
Yeah.
all around it, because I only wrote down the information that I didn't think I would remember. So it was like armor class and damage, and like, how many of them are in this room? And so much of it was put in memory that I would have a dungeon we'd last 3-4 sessions in, and I just had 2 pages that really looked like a crazy wall, that you see in a movie. I mean, it's just madness all around the edges of a map, and sometimes kind of on top of it. So a lot of highlighter.
So usually my session prep is actually the game beforehand. And it's like I just take scroll notes the whole time we're running the game. And that's kind of what I'll refer to a lot of times. And if I'm not being completely lazy, I'll clean that up and put that someplace. And that's how I run like my games going forward. And so when you were telling me like how you have abbreviations in a map and how it looks, and I'm like, my notebooks just look like the scrawlings of a mad person.
Oh, it's in our game room, basically all my folders, I don't throw much away. I don't know why I save a lot of this stuff. Some
Yeah.
of it I've dredged up to throw in videos now, but I am pretty sure that if I was to die under mysterious circumstances, somebody would think that they found like, what are those notebooks from Seven? Like just a small bookshelf of just spiral notebooks full of just madness. It's like, no, they're game notes.
That's what gaming's like. For sure. Tozak Okami wants to know if you have any free adventures or modules available for DMs.
Free ones, no. Part of the problem is most of my D&D adventures I was just talking about, that are just madness scrawled out. People have asked that I publish them or put them out there. It's like, a good quarter of that, if not more, was liberally stolen from so many other adventures that they're like, can you publish that? It's like, well, yeah, except I'm gonna have to remove like half the cool stuff and make up new stuff for it because I can't use that stuff. I totally stole it.
I'm sure the new stuff you made up would be pretty cool, though.
Yeah, well, I'll let them decide. I always think it's cool, even if they tell me later on it wasn't.
So Chris wants to know, when will Nerdarchy play Call of Cthulhu with Seth running the game? I'm down for that.
Man,
As
you guys
long
ever played Call of Cthulhu?
I've never played. I have a little bit of an aversion to Call of Cthulhu because I'm a fan of Lovecraft, and I just envision like the game being, people trying to play the game like it's D&D, and I'm like, any good Lovecraft story doesn't end well. So if the game doesn't end with me my character clawing out their eyes and going mad at the end, at the very least, I'll be so disappointed.
Oh, well, then that would have to be a special request. So we were talking about camps within fandoms.
Yeah.
Call of Cthulhu is exceptionally divided on that, because I am of the pulpy Indiana Jones camp, and then you've got the other side that is very like, it must be pure Lovecraftian, just dread and misery the whole time. So there's actually a lot of like very big divides in the Call of Cthulhu community. It's like, overall, there really aren't that many of you guys. The few of you that there are like in a knife fight over these little details.
So, but that being said, like, I would respect whatever game is being run. And my personal opinion when it comes to the games is, generally, I feel like it's the player's responsibility to find the fun in the game. And if you can't, it's definitely it's the wrong game or the wrong group for you. But first and foremost, you have to try.
It feels so good to hear that. Thank you for saying that. But no, the player. Actually, my very first video I talked about I call the RPG social contract, that the player and the GM have to decide beforehand that I'm going to have fun. No matter what I'm handed, I'm going to enjoy this, versus walk in with this idea of like, if we don't do this, or if it's not presented this way, I'm going to hate it. It's like, no, you just walk in and you take what's offered, and if it's enjoyable, you let it entertain you. So it is it's everyone's responsibility to like kind of enjoy what they're given.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it might not be what the GM is putting out, but maybe you can find fun interacting with the other players, trying to engage them, get them into the game. I feel like there's always ways to do it. I don't, and I don't mean to do that at the expense of the GM either.
No, and there's a big balancing act, because it's part of the GM's there to entertain their players, give them a great story and all this stuff. But at the same time, if the players aren't entertaining themselves and they're merely watching a performance, that's not the way to do it. They have to entertain themselves and each other, and it's just it's collaborative, and so everyone has to be involved.
Here's kind of the esoteric question, Grimhild. If you could go back to 1974 and talk to Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, what are 3 questions you could ask, or pieces of advice you could give them? What would they be?
Well, damn. Wow, I would have to contemplate this on the Tree of the Woe for a while.
Yeah, that one is very, very, very heady.
Let's see. With the first piece of advice I would probably give them,
hire a business manager.
Yeah, hire a business manager for one, and part of it's the warning of, guys, you have no idea how bad this is, or how big it's going to go.
Yeah,
and then also like warn them of the satanic panic looming around the corner.
Oh man, honestly though, I feel like it's the butterfly effect. Anything you ask them to change, or any advice you would give, changes the whole industry. Like, you have no idea what those unforeseen consequences would be. So,
no, I think this exception. So much of it was based off of random flukes of luck than anything else. With any sort of like creativity, it comes down to, it's like there's talent and there's determination and there's all this, and then it still really comes down to a roll of the dice.
Cosmic dice being rolled. Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, if you warned him anything, then, well, you might have just totally screwed it up. But yeah,
I think it would be more interesting to ask them, what were you thinking when you did this? Why Thaco? Why Thaco?
I grew up playing first and second edition. When you're young and your brain is still really flexible, and I never considered THAC0 to be difficult. And people would talk about how difficult THAC0 was. It's like, no, you take this, you add this, and you subtract that. You have to roll a button. It was like, the horrible, complicated formula that it was. And for me, I didn't require thought until we left that, and then years later we came back, wanted to play some like older editions of D&D, and it was like this, holy God, how could I like, how was I able to do all of these formulas with zero thought?
We never thought about it when we were doing it and we were playing back then, and I never heard anyone complain about it back then either. It wasn't until I discovered the internet and later, many years later, like we had one friend that he just automatically flipped it and went third, and it really didn't occur to us until third edition where they're like, yeah, everything goes up now and we're not going to do this weird thing. I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense.
I'd probably tell Gygax that his polearm fetish he should probably tone down. If you remember how many polearms there were?
Oh, the polearms! You can never have too many polearms. Like there was like was it 1 or 2 page spread of all polearms?
it was a 2-page spread with detailed.
Yeah.
Oh my God! So if you were just to pick up the book not knowing anything about it, you would really believe that a polearm is required for absolutely every single player of this game, and
yeah.
So,
and it's actually a terrible weapon. The way we use it in D&D,
Yeah.
It's it was revolutionary for warfare, but when you're in a small group and you're the only one with a polearm, it's not the same.
No, if everybody is lined up and they've got their halberds. Do you remember in the old editions how different weapons affected armor differently?
Yeah, depending on what kind of armor you're wearing, and you had speed factor.
Like crossbows had more armor piercing than like a regular bow, even though they didn't do as much damage. So when you used to open up the old weapons pages, I think most people
all the way across the page, it had different things.
Yeah, I think most people only use like the first 3 columns.
Yeah,
and then just ignored everything else. It's like, well, this is just complicated formulas. It's like, what's the damage for small, medium, and large, and like 1 or 2 other things, and then it's like, I don't need all this.
Yeah, this is just math at this point. For sure. It might not be. I'm sorry. I'm talking to myself to the comments. If you go on our website and probably search free stuff if you're on mobile, you can probably find what you're looking for. I'm just seeing Nerdarchy highlighted a bunch of times, so I'm like trying to pick out questions and stuff. Someone did re-ask. We kind of talked about it earlier, and they asked about your writings, what you write about, and where to start, which we kind of went through. So when it ends, you can go back to the beginning and rewatch it because we get into that fairly early on. So what games are you playing now? Do you have games going on? Do you guys have you moved to online?
Right at this moment, we're currently playing Traveler. So that is my current poison. And then we've been doing some side games of Call of Cthulhu. And eventually, once they release Cthulhu by Gaslight for 7th edition later this year, we're probably going to switch that to being our primary game.
Do you, what is your favorite?
My favorite game? I'd be Call of Cthulhu.
Nice.
That was a game that it was very late in life before I discovered it because I'd always heard a lot of myths about it. And when I finally picked it up and read it, it was a very like, where the hell has this been my whole life? Like, this is exactly up my alley.
What is the appeal to you for Call of Cthulhu versus other games?
One, it is a skill-based mechanic. So I prefer a skill-based engine over level-based. Mm-hmm. One of the things that the older I got, the more it frustrated me with Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of them are classes. when we would go to a skill-based game, which we would have a few side ones of those, and there's no class at all. You just have individual skills, and those go up individually, and you can add new skills. We found it so much freer. Then Call of Cthulhu is very story-based, very role-play heavy, and is not combat focused. Combat in that game is just insanely lethal. So there's no like you jump into the fray and you take a ton of damage and they heal you. It's like no, it's like real life. If somebody pulls out a gun, you run. Or you do what they tell you. And it's so we preferred that aspect a lot more to it.
For us, our go-to kind of like skill-based game was probably M&M, Mutants and Masterminds.
Yeah, people mention that one a lot to me. They say that I would love that one. I just haven't picked it up.
So it's got a weird mechanic for your health that some of our friends find it a little bit harder to grasp because it's not as satisfying as doing like HP and damage, right? Where it's this toughness mechanic, and everything is based off of a D20 roll. So when you would quote unquote take damage, you basically make a saving throw to see if you do and how badly you take it. But your toughness rating goes down and degrades as you take damage. So you could literally get one-shotted on a good roll versus a terrible roll. But on average, it's just going to degrade by 1. And in a game where, 10 might be really high, it doesn't take you that long before... And also you get, as it degrades, that check becomes harder for you.
Okay, so it's got a bit of the death spiral to it.
Yeah.
Man, there are games that could pull off that death spiral just beautifully, and they're fun. There's others where it starts kind of getting bogging down, or it's just so fast that it becomes disheartening. But no, I actually enjoy that, versus you're operating at 100% till you hit 0 hit points. I kind of like the degradation.
But it was one of the first like Supers games that I played where it's like all the stuff you wanted to do that gets done in comic books, you could actually do it. So that's one of the reasons that we kind of enjoyed using that particular system. And we started with the second edition of it, moved into the third edition, which like with each edition they got further and further away from the D&D isms because it's a D20 system that came out in third edition. But it was like one of the few good ones. Because you had that third edition OGL era where so much stuff came out, but so much of it was garbage.
Yeah, that was a weird time because third edition comes out and everybody's all excited, and then all of a sudden there was 900 other third edition compatible books, and players would be like, "Hey, can I use this feat or whatever that came from this book?" And I had to explain to people, it's like, look, just because it was published in a book does not mean that it's remotely good. Yeah, like because weird overpowered stuff and just strange stuff just kept coming out, and you had to vet it. You had to really think about stuff before you allowed it. And, that was a weird time.
So Mongoose is one of the ones that we would allow into the game from time to time. Mongoose Publishing, but they had this one fighter prestige class, and I don't remember the name of the prestige class, but one of the abilities was called Killing Machine, and it was basically cleave, but as long as you always had an enemy within 5 feet of the last thing you murdered, you could keep doing it. So literally you could just cleave your way around the world. Muppet style montage. Yeah, it was a different time for certain. But if you sifted through all the stuff, there was definitely some gems that came out of it.
Oh yeah. Well, and the thing is, there was usually a gem in just about every book that was out there. It's just the difficulty in finding it.
Yeah.
It was kind of unpredictable.
Um, but yeah, we stumbled upon Mutants and Masterminds because one of our friends started running Heroes Unlimited from Palladium, and I'm just not a fan of the Palladium system. It's way too crunchy and 80s for me,
Mhm.
and it has not changed since. Um, and like the character creation was so swingy. And so I started poking around, and I was like, I was ready to be like, yo, why don't we go back to Marvel Phase Rip? Just because I thought that was a better system. I started poking around, and the internet is like, if you want to play Heroes games, you have Champions and Mutants and Masterminds kept coming up, and Mutants and Masterminds was already a D20, and all of our group knew how to play D20 games. I was like, oh, this will be pretty easy. And it's definitely one, if you haven't checked out, you should check out. And like I said, we from first, second, and third edition, they got further and further away from the D&D isms, and it made it feel more like a supers game, and just got better and better.
Yeah, one of those things where when the D20 Open Gaming license came out, a lot of games came up with their D20 version to, I guess, to like open up their base to people. They already know the D20 system, so now they can play this game. And they almost always sucked, because if a game is designed to do something really well, to then try to shoehorn it into a different system is kind of unfair to both the game and to the system.
Yeah.
Like it's just like it's like I like the idea of it, but the I don't know, because Call of Cthulhu had one, Traveler had one, tons of games that should
Everybody,
not have been D20 did it, and it's like,
everybody did it.
you guys just released a really inferior product that just, I understand your reasoning, but it just doesn't work.
So Daryl wants to know: have either of you ever played Rollmaster?
I have not. I actually had a guy recently send me a copy of Rollmaster, but I never played it.
I have not either. For me, my thing is, if I'm going to play a fantasy game, I'm probably going to play D&D. Just that's just how I kind of operate. And then when I want to play something else, a different genre, the last thing I want to play is D&D.
That that's pretty much been how I looked at it for years. And one of the other problems that we encountered is, so we started playing Cyberpunk 2020 as our primary game many years ago, which is a very different animal. And then we just took the system, the interlock mechanic, and we tried to do it in a fantasy setting. And the problem is, everybody had a mental switch that since we were playing a fantasy setting, we automatically started playing it like we were playing D&D. And with such a lethal game as that one was, it was the dumbest thing we could have done. And we knew that we shouldn't do that. Like, we would discuss it as we're doing it. Like, it's just like, so we played so much D&D that we've actually kind of got these patterns that we just would fall back into. And it was a disaster if you tried that with something that wasn't D&D.
So one of the comments is 327 individual skills in Rollmaster 4th edition. I kind of instinctively just hate that.
I am trying. I am trying to imagine how much studying you would have to be a game master, because while a GM shouldn't necessarily have everything memorized, they should at least kind of have a working knowledge of stuff. And if you've got that many, oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure on everybody at the table.
Mm.
Grimhild wants to know: have you played Cthulhu Tech?
I have not.
I think I saw that, and it looked super interesting, at a glance. But again, like, that, how do you make that sci-fi still feel like Cthulhu?
It can be done, but yeah, I haven't checked it out. Because I've done different settings for Call of Cthulhu. Like, we've done modern day and we've done science fiction, and that can work. But Just I've never just looked at Cthulhu tech.
We or I read I had backed a Kickstarter. It was World War Cthulhu, and it was just all anthology stories of these Cthulhu encounters or Lovecraftian style stories throughout all these different eras with war as the backdrop, and and it was pretty good because it was written the way that I feel like a Lovecraft story should go. Guns don't help you at all. The monsters are so alien and horrific that that kind of stuff is kind of pointless.
You know, in the early days of that game, when they were writing adventures, a lot of authors would try to emulate aspects of D&D. So they would put in a ton of mythos monsters, like you're supposed to fight them like a D&D adventure, and they always went with Shoggoths. And Shoggoths, they're just jelly. They don't really have, with outside of a flamethrower, you can't deal with them. And since you're not adventurers that would carry a flamethrower, you're usually just a detective. I don't understand how anybody survived a lot of those old adventures, because there was like a Shoggoth behind every door in some of them. And I was like,
You never have too many Shoggoths.
and there are other opinions.
So how do you run? How do you run your Cthulhu games? Like, what is your approach?
um, Usually we will do the characters are in some sort of club or organization, and we usually like kind of the academic side of it. But then we also do this a mod that's called Pulp Cthulhu, because sometimes you want to also just beat the hell out of the bad guy, which regular Call of Cthulhu, you are very fragile. So we at least kind of like the pulpy aspect of like, well, okay, well, now it's time to pull out twin pistols and just start shooting cultists. So it's a little more Indiana Jones than straight Lovecraft.
Okay, so basically just kind of like flavored with it. So I guess the other thing is in RPGs, horror is always difficult to do, and how much of those elements are you able to get into your Call of Cthulhu games?
Well, okay, I can throw them in regularly, and I've always had horror in our games, no matter if there is a speculative fiction aspect to it, I'm always going to lean the horror direction first. So it's D&D or Call of Cthulhu. But Call of Cthulhu, since there's such a mood aspect, it can be pretty difficult. And I'm not always the best because we laugh so much during our games. We spend most of those game sessions just laughing our butts off. So the hard part, and it's just tricky, and I can't tell you the exact formula to do it, is to get everybody laughing and then kill that instantly with horror. Like where you're like, ha, and like now it happens. And nobody decides to drop that joke at that right moment to shatter the mood. Like if you can get them in it, and nobody just drops a fart joke right then. Like, oh, that's hard to do. But man, you just got to read the room.
Yeah,
Mostly we laugh.
yeah. Horror requires a lot of buy-in from your players, and they have to want to be scared.
Mhm.
Because in an RPG, it's kind of on everyone at the table to create that experience. It's so different than a book or a movie or even a TV series where the medium itself is creating the experience. Here it's the opposite. It's the people enjoying that medium that have to help to create that experience.
Yeah, and well, it's probably like we were saying earlier. It's such a collaborative aspect to gaming that the most competent GM in the world when it comes to running horror uh, is not going to have an easy time of it if they don't have any player buy-in or participation, or if they're actively trying to avoid that. So that's part of it. Like you can get those moods great if everyone's on board. Oh, it's beautiful, but one person could shatter it.
So switching gears a little bit, are you currently writing anything?
Um, Fiction wise, no. Yeah, I've done a couple contract stories recently, which I can't talk about. But currently, my writing project, and I was actually working on it this morning, and probably once we're done with this, I'm going to go right back to it for the next week. Is I am writing a scenario for a publisher, and that's the extent I can allowed to talk about that project.
It's a thing, and I'm ready. Do you know what you want to do next for your fiction?
Um, I'm going to play it by ear. With Ashes of Onyx, I would love to do a sequel story to it, but a lot of it just depends on how well that first book does. Because writing a novel can take, 9 to 12 months, and then followed by another year worth of, I guess, post production, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
Um, that if I'm going to dedicate 2 years to it, I want to make sure that the first book was received well enough to make it worth it.
Are you involved in the cover art at all, like selecting the artists or?
Um, some when with that book, they kind of asked for like kind of some ideas. So I basically gave them a list of a ton of stuff, and they're like, "Okay, we'll see what we can work with." Of like, I want the heroine. I want her. I want to see these symbols. I want the mist in the background, and maybe a little bit of Carcosa. And then with like my Dameron series, the first book, they just kind of showed it to me, and like, what do you think? Like, okay. Then with my Black Raven series, I think the second book I got to have a lot more than the first one. All I said on the first one is I don't want you to be able to see his face clearly, and I want the pendant to be shown. And that was like all I had.
Is that Mountain of Daggers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Because I'm looking at your author page right now, and a lot of the arts, the style anyway, looks very, very similar. Is it the same artist on everything?
The Valdigan series was the same artist who was also the cover designer for those and the Black Raven series, but the artist for those was different. He actually did the pictures, and the cover designer put all the text and stuff on it. And then with Ashes, that was absolutely different because it was a totally different publisher. But they said they were going to try to at least kind of get that look that is with my brand.
Well, they nailed it. Like, at a glance, if you're looking at all of them, it pretty much looks like the same. The same artist on all of them. It is. It's only when I look at when I scroll to the end of the line of books that I see a couple that look different than everything else.
Well, a lot of like with the anthologies I was in, that's where you start getting into just completely all over the place looks, uh, especially some of those older anthologies, mostly because Photoshop wasn't too much of a thing at the time. So some of the covers are a bit rough.
And so I know you got physical books, you've got Kindle. Is there also books on Audible?
Oh yeah, Dameron and the second book in that series, Hanassier, were Audio Award finalists for Best Paranormal Audiobook of the Year. So those are actually super well received. My narrator for the Valdican and the Black Raven series is a gentleman named R.C. Bray, who is just a phenomenal narrator. And it was just pure luck that I ended up getting him before he had his huge break. He did Andy Weir's The Martian, and that exploded.
Yeah.
And we already had him when The Martian came out, but so it was like this, like everybody listened to that, they're like, well, what else has he done? And like the next book it dropped was me.
Nice.
And then for Ashes of Onyx, we had Caroline Schaefer did that one, because since we had a female protagonist, Blackstone Audio said we want a female narrator. It's like, yeah, I could agree to that. So then she did that book, but R.C. Bray then did all the others.
Yeah, some of the audiobooks are getting really like high end when it comes to the production, where they've got multiple readers and
Oh yeah.
we
I'm an audio addict, man. I am almost always listening to some book on audio. and that
I
was
I've moved more towards that in my latter years. But anymore, I struggle to read the way. It's very depressing. I'm very angry with myself right now. So much self-loathing because, that used to be my preferred medium of entertainment is to read. And when I was a teenager, I would go through like a Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance novel every 2 to 3 days. And even as I got older, I would read at least a novel a week or something. And now it's like I have so many. I've got half finished books that I just stopped reading, and I was enjoying them, and I have no reason to not finish them, and I don't get it why I just can't bring myself to read like I used to. I do a little bit better with audiobooks, but yeah, it's terrible.
well, that was actually the one thing I miss about having a day job was on the commute, I'd be listening to my book. And then at my last job, I did a ton of data entry
Yeah.
stuff. So I just have my audiobook playing because I only needed about 15% of my brain to do my job. So I think I'd get like 5, 6 hours a day worth of listening time. So I was just chewing through audiobooks. And that also allowed me to really expand genres. Because if you're only knocking out like 2, 3 books a year or so, you're only sticking to like the genres you love. But if you're knocking out a book a week, oh no, I just listen to anything. So that was actually really good for me. But now, I do it at the gym or I do it when I'm doing housework. Yeah, that's
That that is kind of what happened to me because I was like, all right, I'm not reading, but you know what? I do have an hour commute each way, and then I drove for a living. I did heavy construction, driving a tack truck, so most of what I was doing was kind of self-contained. So I did start like, that's when I got an Audible subscription and just started listening to tons of audiobooks, and I did exactly that. I said like, you know what? I've had enough fantasy. I started going into steampunk and sci-fi, science fiction a lot more. And a lot of different stuff like that. But now that I don't go anywhere, so pretty much it's like, and for a long time, like when we did like all of our own editing and stuff like that, like I would do that stuff. So you can't listen to stuff while you're editing video.
what sucks is how many times I've attempted to like okay, I'm gonna do this job. Let me put my headphones on. Like, wait, I can't do that. I
Yeah,
actually have to listen to what I'm doing. Uh, Audiobooks, one of the big things that kind of boosted them was truck drivers. For years, they were just a tool for the blind until evidently, basically, some truck stops figured out, like, if we sell some audiobooks on racks, we're going to sell through them like mad. And so the entire audiobook industry really has its roots in truck drivers.
that's surprising. Anybody with a lot of commute, it just makes sense because you're kind of like you're captive. What else are you going to do? If you're like me and most people, you're tired of listening to the same 5 songs on the radio. So you're like, what can I do that's better with this time? And that kind of that comes into play. Now you mentioned the gym. I can't do that because it doesn't like if I'm in the gym, I need something that's going to pump me up. So I generally want something that's violent and angry to listen to.
I Sometimes I am listening to something that is horribly paced for what I'm trying to, because you want a little
Yeah,
bit more action, and I'm listening to Agatha Christie.
yeah,
And it's kind of odd.
yeah. So we are coming up on the hour mark. Anything you want to leave us with before we head on out?
No, I don't know. I'm just enjoying chatting, man.
Yeah, this is definitely
This is my
great.
day.
We'll have to have you back on sometime in the near future for sure, and hopefully once the apocalypse ends, we can hang out in person at one of the conventions.
Oh my god, I would love that.
We were hoping to get you out in October to our convention that we've had to postpone until next year, but hopefully we get you out, come out to Philadelphia.
I
Be
can,
awesome.
well, I was already looking at 2021 for it, so evidently it's
With
we'll see.
with that, we're head on out, and until next time, folks, stay nerdy.